Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's wonderful to have you with us today for this very special presentation on creating your family legacy, maximizing giving, and minimizing taxes. Sounds awesome to me. Who doesn't want to maximize what you can do and minimize what you have to spend with respect to taxes? So looking forward to hearing more. I recognize a lot of the names on this call today. I think some of you are like me. You're a member of our St. Joseph Society, which means you made a choice to name St. Joe's in your will. Others of you I know are longtime supporters, and I think I've also met some of you at our senior series, which we've hosted on a variety of health topics over the last few months. So however you're connected to St. Joe's, we're really glad you're with us, and we're really grateful for your continuing support. My name's Maria Dyke, and I'm the president and CEO of St. Joseph's Health Center Foundation. So this is a historic year for St. Joe's. We are turning 100 in 2021. And I think a lot has changed in 100 years, and we've grown and changed too. We were a 25-bed hospital when we were first started in 1921, and now we have more than 400 beds, and we see, over 350,000 patients a year. But one thing that hasn't changed at St. Joe's in the last 100 years is our promise to always be there to meet the health needs of our West End neighbors. And your support and the support of all the donors that have generously contributed to St. Joe's in past years has really made this possible. And you're the reason that we're able to continue keeping our promise to the West End and continuing serving this community. So as a supporter, you've given us such an important gift. You're giving, many of you are giving now, and that helps our work every year. And many of you have also made a legacy contribution, so you want to help us in the future. And that's going to help us continue keeping our promise. We want to make some big improvements to care for people currently using us and for future generations. We know it's been a really tough year, a challenging one for everyone. And yet through it all, we keep being reminded about how much we can accomplish when we work together. Communities really never mattered more. And so we're so grateful for you continuing to be with us in our corner. And I think for many of you too, this last year has really emphasized the importance of your family and also the important role we all play in making a difference. And our presentation today focuses on both of those things, family and making a difference, by thinking about what your legacy is. Creating a legacy is something you can do on your own, or you can do it with your family. And like me, I bet you've been thinking about your values and your traditions, especially in this last year. And I know many of you have expressed a desire to do more for your hospital, but you might feel unsure about how best to go about doing that, or whether you even can in terms of your planning. So that's why we're really excited to share today's presentation with you. Our guest speaker, Mark Halpern, has some wonderful tips and starting points to share, so you can continue your thinking about how to make a meaningful legacy. One of the best stories I have to share is by a donor whose name was Gerald Brawley. He's one of our most significant donors. There's a picture of him. It's the only picture we have of him and his St. Bernard dog, taken in the 1950s. So Gerald Brawley was a very forward-thinking individual. He arranged a gift. He wanted to honor the most important person in his life, who was his mother. So he left a legacy. And he actually passed away in 1962. And here we are over 50 years later, and his gift continues to make a difference for our hospital. Like, it's extraordinary. Every 2 months, we receive a donation through a fund that Mr. Brawley set up. And so his gift over the last 50 plus years has really improved care for generations of people who've turned to St. Joe's. We never got to say thank you to him in his lifetime, but we really, appreciate his contribution. And I think it serves as a great example about the difference one person can make in thinking carefully about how they want to structure their support moving forward. So I'd like to turn things over to Carrie Gemmel, who's our manager of planned giving here at the foundation. But before I do, I just want to share a short video that talks a little bit about our 100-year history at St. Joe's.
We promised we'd be here to meet the healthcare needs of the West End. We promised we'd be here, too. We promised to be here and right here. Here's where we've kept our promise every day for 100 years. Now, we're making a promise for our next century, starting with an emergency department built for the next century. It will be the first to integrate learnings from COVID-19, will nearly double our capacity, and will provide a safer, streamlined patient experience for our growing community. Our promise started with just 25 beds, and we're still keeping that promise to a community of 500,000. Taking that promise further into the future is why we're here. And here. And here. So join us as we kick off a celebration of care for our community. A lot has changed in 100 years, except our St. Joe's promise.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you all for being here today. I joined St. Joseph's Health Center Foundation earlier this year to help donors and community members create legacies in support of St. Joseph's Health Center that reflect their true dedication and health to healthcare in the West End. And I've been fortunate enough to come on board during this commemorative 100th year and had a chance already to speak with many of you. What's really struck me about the community so far is really just how many donors have shared with me that St. Joe's feels like home. And whether you're a St. Joe's baby or you studied nursing here or you use the hospital in a critical time of your life, one thing has been very clear, and that is that this is your hospital. It's been a real joy to learn about these connections, and I look forward to meeting many more of you in the months and the years to come. We have a fabulous presentation for you today, Create Your Family Legacy, Maximize Giving, Minimize Taxes, with our expert advisor host, Mark Halpern, who is CEO of WealthInsurance.com. I have got just a few housekeeping notes to mention off the start. We are recording this session, and you will receive a link at the end of the event if you'd like to watch it again or share it with someone that you know. There will be a Q&A session after Mark's presentation, so please feel free to put any questions that you have into the chat box. You'll notice the icon down at the bottom of your screen. And then just off to your right, you'll see a little box, and you can just type in any question that you have in there, and we'll be able to answer that after Mark's presentation. Also, after the event, you'll receive a survey in your email. And in this survey, you'll have the opportunity to select whether you'd like to meet with Mark for a 1-hour complimentary consultation, just to discuss your own situation, any questions that you might have. And you can also select to meet with me as well to discuss your legacy with St. Joe's Foundation. I also wanted to share with you that we are pleased to partner with the Canadian Free Wills Network this year. So what that is, it allows us the opportunity to give our donors the chance to write a basic will. The costs are covered, and that would be through participating lawyers in our area. So if you're interested in receiving more information about this partnership that we have, I would be happy to send you out an information package. So please let us know in the survey as well whether you'd like to receive that, and I will follow up with everybody by email too, so you'll have my contact information. And now it is a pleasure to introduce Mark Halpern, Wealth Advisor Extraordinaire and friend of St. Joseph's Health Center Foundation. Mark is a certified financial planner, a trust and estate practitioner, a master philanthropy advisor, financial advisor for philanthropy. And Mark has helped many business owners, entrepreneurs, and professionals, as well as affluent families for over 30 years. As CEO of WealthInsurance.com, Mark and his team provide tax-advantaged insurance solutions to protect families and businesses, working closely with accountants, lawyers, bankers, and other financial professionals to provide comprehensive estate planning solutions for their clients. Mark is a dedicated volunteer who sits on our advisors council, and he assists our plan giving program. I know Mark also volunteers with many other organizations across the city as well. Thank you so much, Mark, for being so generous with your time today and for sharing your knowledge with us. And I'll turn things over to you now, Mark.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Maria. It's such a pleasure to be here. That video, by the way, was beautiful. I really look at St. Joe's, and there are lots of health centers in Toronto and in Canada, but I look at St. Joe's as like this big hug around a community that really has been there for people when they really need it. That makes it much more special, certainly, and that's why the people I'm sure are on this call today, that you're living that because you want to give back and you've already done something, and that's fantastic. Kudos to you, and hopefully after today you'll see that there are even better ways to give back or maximize your giving, minimize your taxes. So I'm very excited for that. The other thing I thought about was just this 100th anniversary. That's a very big, significant event, and here we are in 2021. Like 100 years doesn't seem like a long time, but imagine how different the world will be in 100 years from now. I certainly know I'm not planning on being here then, but hopefully, like Mr. Brawley, there's going to be gifts and endowments and people who have planned forward that their legacies can continue going forward as well. So I'm very excited to share with you what we do and how we help people go from what I call success to significance for their family. So I'm just going to put up my screen here, and hopefully everybody can see this. And Carrie, that looks good. Give me a thumbs up. We're good. Okay, great. So just, of course, whatever we speak about today, everybody, we work with clients, professional advisors. We collaborate with them. Just make sure, don't do it yourself. It's very important. We've had people take some ideas and try to work it out and then have some tax issues. So I just want to give you that sort of little public service announcement. The world has really changed. Like, forget about 100 years of St. Joe's. The world has changed in the last 20 years. In 2001, we had Steve Jobs, Bob Hope, and Johnny Cash. And 20 years later, it seems like there's no jobs, no hope, and no cash. But it's not all doom and gloom. That the people in Ottawa are trying their best. After printing a lot of money, they're going to actually have to collect a bunch of it as well. So they've decided to introduce a new simplified one-page tax return with one question. How much money did you make? Please send it to us. Now, listen, we need taxes in Canada. There's no question. That's what keeps our hospitals going and our educational facilities. But at the same time, there's just so much tax that we have to pay. So are there better ways for us to actually utilize our services? Now, as Carrie said, I'm 30 years in professional practice, but my real start started actually 47 years ago. I'm going to get to that in a second. And that's when my father, my late father of blessed memory, died of a heart attack at the age of 50. I was 11. I was the youngest of 4 boys. And my mother, who was 48 at the time, had to go back to work to support our family. Why was that? Because my father was a busy engineer and he had lots to do. And unfortunately, he didn't have a will, and there was very little savings, and there was no life insurance. So it was very difficult for us. Fast forward, we meet with some very, very sophisticated people and successful people, and you would think they'd have everything all organized and together, but we find that's not the case. Especially during COVID, when people are much more aware of their mortality, they realize they don't have up-to-date wills or powers of attorney, or people don't know where their stuff is, digital passwords or insurance. But one area for sure that they haven't really worked on is this area of creating a legacy. And they're much more interested in doing that today because, it's one thing to be a donor. It's another thing to really become a partner in a more significant way. And here's today's reality. Taxes are going up. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. The last budget was very gentle, but you're going to see an inheritance tax, a wealth tax, potentially a tax on principal residences, income tax increases. Wow. So, that's something to be aware of. Secondly, donors are getting older, and a big part of the money that comes into charities comes from older, significant, what we call partners. And we have to make sure that this message gets out to them before, while the sun is shining, to be able to make some planning. We're also in an information age, or I call it a misinformation age. People are trying to get all their information online, and it's really not necessarily customized for them. So it's important to have a source and a team of people working with you. Um, Freedom 55, we've all heard of the London Life adage. Today, Freedom 55 is when your youngest child is 55. Now, we laugh at that, but the reality is I remember getting out of school, I had a bit of debt, but today, kids getting out of school, debt, COVID, finding a job, buying real estate, it's not so simple. So people definitely have to take care of their family first, but then look at ways to help society at large. The good news, as I mentioned, is people are seeking meaning in their lives. And we look at the big picture for our clients, making sure that their financial architecture and the financial furniture that they started with reflects their current financial architecture and furniture. So this is just a long list of things that people have to be mindful of. As you can see, we talk about charitable plan giving always in this process. And how do we get there? It's really here. So for most Canadians, they work very, very hard, and you get to a certain stage in your life where you kind of stop working, or maybe your money's continuing to work for you. But at some point you start utilizing that money for lifestyle. But the reality is the people that I meet with, that unless they were to invest their money in a penny stock or start spending lavishly, chances are they're going to have more money when they die than what they have today. So they're sitting there as the custodian or trustee on money for the next generation. But what they're not aware of is that they're partnering with the tax department on that money. So what we want to do is find out, make sure you get a check mark, your retirement needs are all looked after, including, giving money to the kids or helping them buy a house or starting a business or buying a recreational property, whatever it is. But know that you've got a big check mark, but know what your tax is today and what your tax is going to be at life expectancy. And then if there's a way for us to take some of that never spend money that's just being taxed and use it to preserve your estate or to create a legacy, that's really the first step. And that's because we have a lot of taxes payable. Here's just some example of assets that everybody has, that these are all taxable upon death. And in Ontario, taxes are quite exorbitant. So if you have RSPs or RIFs or pensions upon death without a spouse, they're going to be taxed at 54%. If you have any appreciated securities or investment property or business, the gains could be taxed upwards of 27%. If you have money in a holding company, it could be anywhere from 47 to 70% without proper planning. And then there's taxes on income inside of a corporation. And then there's probate taxes, which in Ontario is 1.5% of the market value of any assets that are held in just one person's name. So add it all up, it's a lot of tax, and people are not aware of that. So that's really part of our conversation today. Now, really, this conversation around legacy to me is a bit of a sandwich. There's the emotional part, there's technical, like how do we do it? And then there's the emotional part as well. But I put this out to everybody on the call today and to any clients that I meet, that each one of us has 3 possible beneficiaries to our estate. You have family, you have the government, and you have charity. And each of us can only pick 2. Which 2 would you pick? Well, most people would say, I'll take family and charity. So the nice thing is with proper planning, you can be remembered for leaving a large check to charity as opposed to writing a big check to the tax department. And now what I want to do is just go through some different planning options for you, very simple, high level, and hopefully you'll get some good wisdom and knowledge out of this to help yourself and your family create a legacy and do something significant for St. Joe's as well. Now, what do we do? Most of the time, there are people out there who are already giving, and the people on this call are people who already give. That means they've got the DNA for that. And then there are people who maybe don't have the DNA lifetime of giving. It's just something they've sort of kept everything within the family. So when people realize that they have a choice where their taxes go, even those people who have not traditionally given now want to give, and those people who have been giving want to give more or do it more cost and tax efficiently. We call that creating accidental philanthropists. And it's a beautiful thing because You know, we've created a lot of philanthropy for people that didn't know that they didn't have to be Bill Gates or Warren Buffett in order to be charitable. And here I just want to give a very high level of what I call the best accidental philanthropists out there, because it might be somebody on this call, it might be somebody that you know, it might be a family member, but certainly widows, divorcees, and singles who don't have a spouse to roll everything over to upon their death are going to be hit with a deemed disposition on their assets at death. So there's going to be a big tax event there. So we need to find out what that is and plan accordingly. If anybody has sold or will be selling a business or some investment real estate or appreciated securities, that's going to be a year they have a big tax bill, but it's also the year they can give their most amount of money to charity to mitigate that tax. Or if you have done some estate planning and you've done an estate freeze, so that's something where you're passing along the growth of your estate to the next generation or to a trust, that's also a place to go ahead and take what would be taxes and create legacy from it. Or if you have a donor advised fund or you have a foundation, those are people who can do wonderful transformational charity as well. Or if you have a bill, you know you're going to be paying taxes in April of next year, but you've got a whole bunch of appreciated non-registered securities. The government has introduced since 1995 25 pieces of legislation to make it easier for people to give. And one of those, which is beautiful, is instead of giving cash, checks, and credit cards to St. Joe's, look at mutual funds, stocks, ETFs, or segregated funds you have that have appreciated and donate those, because you don't pay any capital gains tax when you donate those, and you get a charitable receipt for the full amount. That means you're giving away money that doesn't belong to you because the taxes are embedded in that, and now you're making those taxes become charity. Just a little idea. Anyone who has an existing life insurance policy they no longer need, consider donating that and saving taxes today or saving taxes down the road. Anybody that has an estate tax bill on death, there's a great way to create that into charity as opposed to paying the taxes. And finally, anybody that's left a bequest in their will, like many of the people on this call, there are just ways to magnify that even more. And here's the simple math. If you give $2 to charity, you save $1 of tax. That's really the simple math. And if you donate that during your lifetime, while you're alive, any receipt you get, charitable receipt, can offset up to 75% of your annual taxes payable in April. And any additional amounts can be carried forward for another 5 years. So that's one point to consider. And the other thing is if you give charity at death, that charity can actually offset up to 100% of your estate taxes, including the year prior. So this is all formulated by the government in order to help Canadians to be more charitable, but also the government realizes that they cannot afford to pay for all the costs that are associated with the nonprofits in Canada. So they really want us to partner with that. And here are some gifting options, very high level. Leaving a gift in your will or bequest. We know about that. People are aware of that. An RSP or RIF beneficiary, we'll talk about that in a second. Gifting securities, we mentioned briefly, and then we'll talk about gifting life insurance as well. So as far as gifted a will, just consider either changing your will and leaving a percentage or a dollar amount to St. Joe's Hospital, or what you can do is you can go to your financial institution and get a multiple beneficiary form on your registered money and leave a percentage or dollar amount to St. Joseph's as well. Again, all you're doing is giving what would be taxable to St. Joseph's in order to not pay the tax and create money for the hospital. And so there it is. I didn't realize. There's the example. Change your will for a specific amount or percentage, or make the change in your beneficiary in your RSP or RIF. Why do I bring up RSPs and RIFs? Because if you're single, divorced, or widowed in Canada, you're at a big disadvantage because, again, you don't have a spouse to roll everything over to on a tax-free basis. So here's an example. If somebody had $1 million in an RSP or a RIF, their kids would only get $460,000. So that means the government got $540,000 and your children got $460,000. So we have certain strategies where instead your children could get $1.5 million as opposed to just the $460,000, and we could create over $500,000 gift to a charity, providing you don't need all of the income on your RIF that you're receiving right now. So again, there's no cookie cutter here. Each situation is unique, but that's something that you should be considering. And we mentioned already, here is an example. We call it the double play, but let's say somebody was usually giving $50,000 in cash every year as a gift. Now, again, this is all very scalable, but let's say they had $50,000 in shares, which only cost them $10,000. That means there's been a $40,000 capital gain inside that portfolio. If they sold those $50,000 of shares, they would pay $10,800 of tax. But instead, by donating those $50,000 in shares, there's no $10,800 tax that has to be paid, and you get a full receipt for $50,000 that will likely save you about $25,000 of tax. So this is a strategy to consider every fall, September, October, November, December, as a way of doing some tax planning for yourself for next April. And if you have money inside of a corporation, so corporate securities, again, giving instead the same $50,000 in shares inside of a corporation that had a cost base of $10,000, that $50,000 becomes now a deduction for the company. So it reduces the company's tax value. But one of the benefits also is it creates a $40,000 capital dividend account credit, which now allows somebody to take $40,000 out of their company tax-free. Amazing. So that's almost like income splitting with your family. And again, one of the nice things there is if you want that money to go back to your family, then you might want to use the tax savings to buy life insurance to put the $50,000 back into the hands of your children. But again, it's a timing issue at that point. So keep that in mind, especially for somebody who's sold a business or somebody who's sold their investment real estate. It's a great way to convert those taxes into charity and use insurance to get the money back into the hands of your family. We don't have a lot of tax shelters left in Canada other than your principal residence, which they're re-looking at in terms of it being taxable, and a TFSA, which is limited to $6,000 a year. And lottery winnings. In Canada, they're tax-free. In the US, they're not. So don't buy your lottery tickets in the US. And actually, I just was introduced to a lottery winning family last year. It was a lot of fun to work with them. And the last one is tax-exempt life insurance. They're the final four, which means anything else that you are investing in, the CRA has somebody with their hand out that wants to participate in the success of your investing, except for these four. So I think it would be incumbent upon us to find out how can we utilize some of this to actually help our families. Now, here's just an example of the after-tax cost of a donation, just to show you the difference in giving versus cash, checks, and credit cards. Here's an example of somebody who wanted to give away $1 million to charity. Now, again, this is scalable. We'll be very happy to take $1 million, $5 million, $10 million, but also 100,000, 10,000. Just you can work out the numbers. But here, if they gave $1 million in cash, the cost per dollar is about 50 cents. Oops, it's about 50 cents per dollar, as you can see here. And if you gave $1 million of appreciated securities, assuming there was a very low cost base, the cost per dollar that you're donating is about 23 cents per dollar. And if you are fortunate enough to be able to invest in flow-through shares, and depending on what province you live in, the cost per dollar can be anywhere between 5 cents and 15 cents per dollar. And then the last one, life insurance, for the same $1 million donation, the cost per dollar is about 12 cents a dollar, or 12 cents per dollar. So you can see not all donations are the same. And that's based, that last example, on a joint last to die life insurance policy on a 55-year-old couple. So it's very important for you to, if you're going to be charitable, at least let's do it in the most cost and tax efficient way, because it allows you to either give more or give more for the same amount that you were planning on paying, or be able to give more for less cost. We mentioned about the gifts of life insurance. So here are some examples. One example is consider donating an existing life insurance policy. A lot of people I meet have old life insurance policies for $100,000, $250,000, $500,000, $1 million. Those policies can be donated to charity, and you can actually get a fair market receipt for the death benefit of anywhere between 20 and 60% of that death benefit. Now, when you donate it to St. Joe's, you get a charitable receipt for that. That saves saves you taxes. And going forward, the premiums you pay are actually considered charitable donations. So you get a receipt for that as well. How lovely. We had a client in their 70s where it was a husband and wife that had a $250,000 life insurance policy. The husband had passed away and the wife wanted to cancel the policy. She didn't see the 250 as really moving the dial in their family's estate planning. And I said, well, why not donate it to charity? And she said, yeah, that I would like to do. So we met with her and her accountant and her son. And instead, she donated that $250,000 to a charitable foundation. She received an $87,000 charitable receipt that saves her over $40,000 of tax. And going forward, the premiums that she pays are considered charitable donations. And the charity recognized her for being a legacy giver of significance. And what did it do? She was going to cancel that policy. So don't cancel any policies. Consider donating them to St. Joe's. And in some cases, if you don't want to carry on that policy in terms of the payments, often the charities will pay those premiums going forward as well if it's the right kind of policy. Second way to use insurance is donate a new policy. So if you donated a policy to St. Joe's for $1 million as an example, then your premiums would be charitably receipted while you're alive, or wait. In other words, don't get the charitable receipt now, just donate the policy as St. Joe's is the beneficiary on death, in which case that will offset a whole bunch of your estate taxes. So for example, if you have an estate tax bill of $500,000, wouldn't it be nicer to acquire a $1 million life insurance policy for pennies on the dollar and make St. Joe's the beneficiary of that? Now you've eliminated your $500,000 estate tax, but you've created $1 million gifts for a charity that you're passionate about. Again, with some planning. And finally, if anybody has some current insurance right now, just change the beneficiary for a percentage or dollar amount to St. Joe's. And again, please let St. Joe's know what you've done. Why? Because St. Joe's wants to recognize you while you're alive, and they want to thank you and include you as part of their legacy family. So it's, not everybody likes to do that, but I know that that St. Joe's would very much like to be able to recognize you for your generosity. And here's just an example on the left side, just to give you an idea how insurance works. Just assume somebody's putting away $100,000 of investment money every year for 15 years, and they're getting 4%. So they put away $1.5 million inside their corporation. So they put away $1.5 million. At the end of 30 years, it's only worth 2.3. So it hasn't even doubled. This is based on a 60-year-old couple, 1658. On the right-hand side, the same situation, somebody's using $100,000, what we call never spend money, and they're still doing that for 15 years, but they're creating an initial death benefit with insurance of about $2.5 million. And after 30 years, they've created over $4 million. So look how nice that is. We've created almost $2 million of additional wealth for that family. Why not give that additional amount to charity and still give your family the piece that you're going to be giving, doing a more traditional investment strategy? So again, just ways to create money where it's really not costing you anything and not costing your family anything. And here's a big secret. Life insurance can be owned and paid for by a private foundation or a donor advised fund. Most people don't know about this, and most people don't know about donor advised funds. So I really recommend that you look into it. It's a wonderful way of creating a structure for your family that allows you to only get one charitable receipt every year, and you can disperse money to any registered charity in Canada with the money that you've put inside of that fund. It's professionally managed, and again, that money can be distributed to St. Joe's at any time for any percentage or as part of a legacy gift. Other giving strategies, we mentioned private foundations and donor advised funds. We've mentioned flow through shares. Charitable gift annuities are just another way for you to be able to receive a guaranteed cash flow of about 6% on your investment money, and also get a charitable receipt today to save you taxes. Very nice idea. Again, based on information that you provide, we can provide you with some options. CPP philanthropy. To me, this is really a wonderful strategy that I just want to touch on, and that is that once you turn 65 in Canada, you're entitled to receive CPP. And if you've been contributing through your life, it works out to about $26,000 for a husband and wife per year. Most of the people that I meet, that $26,000, they don't really need that. They pay taxes on it, it's reinvested, and then they pay taxes on it again. So if you're philanthropic, here's something you might want to consider. Use that CPP, and you could acquire about $1 million plus life insurance policy that's owned by St. Joe's, and they're also the beneficiary. If that's the case, then your CPP is considered a charitable donation. You pay no taxes on your CPP, but you've created $1.5 million legacy gift for St. Joe's. How wonderful. Or alternatively, take the CPP, pay taxes on it, and acquire $1.5 million insurance policy, but let St. Joe's be the beneficiary of that policy, in which case St. Joe's would receive the $1.5 million, and that would save your estate $750,000 of taxes. And the third option is take the CPP, get the $1.5 million insurance policy, and make your children the beneficiary of that. And instead donate your registered funds to St. Joe's, which would normally be taxed at 54%. So there's so many different ways to do it, all by using government benefits. And it doesn't have to be the full 26,000. It could be a portion of that. All depends on your particular situation. Last couple of things, ROP life insurance, that's where you could actually acquire an insurance policy, make St. Joe's the beneficiary of that policy, but upon death, they receive the proceeds of that policy, and your family receives the proceeds of all the premiums you paid for that policy. So yes, you haven't been able to use those premiums during your lifetime, but the premiums come back to your family, but there's a legacy gift for St. Joe's. Very nice idea. Gift maximizer is just, people think about life insurance as something that you only benefit from when you die, but we actually have ways for charities to actually benefit and receive money while you're alive on a life insurance policy. So we have a client, she's a philanthropist, and she created a $2.7 million gift for a charity, which included $1.2 million of cash flow during her lifetime to the charity, and a $1.5 million legacy gift on her death. And on the cost of that for her happened to be over a 10-year period of time, $330,000 to do a $2.7 million gift. Had she donated securities, that could have been brought down to even under $200,000. So a great idea. Policy preserver. If anybody has any term life insurance in Canada, $7 billion of term life insurance actually gets canceled every year. Instead of canceling that policy, consider donating it to charity, receiving a charitable receipt, and either funding the policy going forward to receive tax benefit now, or as I said, the charity may be interested in funding that policy, but they will recognize you. And that's something, again, people have term insurance policies all over sitting around, so don't let that just be thrown away. And then anybody who, as I said before, who's done an estate freeze and has some frozen preferred shares, great way for them to create charity and reduce taxes as well. So those are just some ideas. What we've come across is we see that there are kind of four definitions of four givers that give charity. Some of them want to do it completely anonymously. Don't put my name anywhere, otherwise I don't want to give to you. They're very, very modest about their giving. Others want to give because they want to set an example for others, and they want to encourage people and let them know what they did, and have people follow suit. Others give because they want to be remembered, like Mr. Brawley. They want to imagine how long he's been gone for, that every 2 months money appears. What a great way to for his grandchildren to remember their grandfather. And others give because it's great for business. And there are some great ways to be philanthropic, which really are good for business as well. And here's an example. This is one of my friends, Andy Kovacs. He's an insurance advisor who is involved with St. Joe's as well. Here's a couple that he knows who are in their 30s. And there's Maria, on a day when people could actually be close together, and it was sunny at least, where this family gave a gift of $1 million of a life insurance policy at a cost to them of, I don't know, maybe it cost them $5,000 a year after tax for maybe 10 or 20 years. But what happens is they get recognized, and that nice big check looks great, and it's great for his business. So there are certainly wonderful ways to give where it can help you in your entrepreneurial pursuits. Lastly, just a couple of case studies. I met with a cardiologist in his 50s. We realized he had too much life insurance and he wanted to cancel it. I suggested, instead of canceling it, why don't we donate it to charity? Because he's philanthropic and he's also going to have some estate taxes. So he made 4 charities the beneficiaries of that policy. South Lake Hospital Foundation wrote a 2-page article on him called The Cardiologist with Heart, and a foundation that he gave some money to as well recognized him in their Book of Life, which recognized like 24 philanthropists that year. So he went from let's cancel that policy to becoming a very well-known philanthropist. And I remember when the article came out, I called him up. I said, Jonathan, this is amazing. I said, where's my name exactly in this article? It wasn't, I knew that without talking to him or finding out about his particular situation, there's not a chance that he would have done something like that. And of course, he's become a big ambassador. The academic, somebody heard me speak at one of my events. She was an 80-year-old academic, widowed, who's done all of her own investing, and she had a net worth of $10 million. And when I met with her, I said, Sandra, I hate to tell you, you're not worth $10 million. You're only worth $6.5 million. She was very offended because she takes great pride in her investment work. But what she didn't realize was that there was $1 million capital gains tax on her appreciated securities. And then she had $2 million on her RIF and some other taxes. So that got her attention. Instead, what did we do? The family is getting $10 million, charity's getting $3 million, and the tax department's getting $500,000. As opposed to $3.5 million. Again, all with planning. And the last thing here, an entrepreneur, young man who is trying to develop a business where he wants to meet high net worth clients. We also acquired $1 million insurance policy on him and his wife. He was in his 30s. And I said, what's the biggest charity in your area? He happens to be in Southwest Ontario. So we gave it to a hospital foundation there. And they recognized him for giving $1 million. I think his cost was about $3,500 a year. And now he is the co-chair of the Young President's Council. So he's now associating with all of these people who actually do write checks for $1 million, and he's getting into the party at a much smaller cost. So just to give you an idea of how philanthropy can help you in your life. And remember I told you about it's a sandwich, the emotional, the technical, the emotional. I always ask clients that I meet, I said, do you know the names of your grandparents? And I'm sure everyone on this call knows the names of their grandparents. But how many of us know the names of their great-grandparents? Not too many of us. This is actually a picture of my great-grandparents of blessed memory, Liba and Aaron Gross, in 1934 in Poland before they died in the Holocaust. But imagine if on January the 1st, you received an envelope in the mail and there was a check for $10,000 from your great-grandfather. Do you think you'd remember their name? Well, with proper planning, like Mr. Brawley, you can actually be remembered. And why is this important? They say that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That's when the weather conditions are perfect. But when it's windy out, the apple's far from the tree. And when there's a tsunami like there is today with social media, etc., that the apple doesn't even know it came from a tree. So this whole idea of philanthropy is really about passing along values and wisdom and responsibility, not so much to our children, but really more to our grandchildren, and making sure that they are going to continue in the ways that we as Canadians have built up this country and built up our wealth and taken on responsibility for great institutions like St. Joe's, where we really want to give back. So I think it's incumbent that people take the time to see how they can go from success to significance. And just as far as like what I call the next steps. So I have a bit of a 48-hour rule. I just find that, all of us have a little bit of ADD and we're now on to our next thing after each meeting and each phone call. My 48-hour rule is if something here resonated for you, so do something about it. First thing you can do is you can speak to Carrie Gemmel, who's on the call. She's fantastic at helping you organize something special that you could do for St. Joe's. Another idea is, please, I'd love to meet you and have a no obligation meeting. There's no, again, it would be an exploratory meeting just to see how we can help you to become more successful and significant and more cost and tax efficient with your giving. So help you to navigate some of those waters and consider your own St. Joe's legacy gift. they really are an important fixture in our community's lives and in your life and in your family's lives. And we want to make sure 100 years from now that they are very well funded to do that. So learn about it, but don't ignore it. There's just too much riding on the line and too much of a loss that could happen if we don't give it attention. And here, just as an example, here's an example of your $1 million life insurance gift, if you should so desire. This is based on a single life, so not on a husband and wife, but on a single life where they're healthy non-smokers and they're paying into a policy for 10 years only. So you can see here, these are the after-tax costs on the right-hand side for that policy payable over 10 years. If you were to get an insurance policy on a joint last to die basis, meaning a policy that was on the husband and the wife, assuming husband and wife, then these costs could be lower by up to 40%. So it's a really very cost and tax efficient way of creating a tremendous legacy gift at a small cost. But as I said, each situation is unique, and you'll have to, I'll be happy to talk to you about your own individual needs as well. And that, if I would just say, is really a wrap. I'd like to finish with one quick story of a man that I met a few years back. Nick, he heard me speak at a Leave a Legacy event, and Nick was a man in his 70s. He had never married, never had children, and we ascertained that he had about a $3 million tax bill that would be due because there was nobody to pass his money to. So he was interested in doing a legacy gift. We went around to different institutions. He was involved in physics and science and wanted to sort of leverage his background with that. And he delayed. He was a Renaissance man. I'll get to it. I finally called him one day and he said, Mark, it's not a good time. I'm at North York General Hospital at that time. He had a heart attack and he said he would get back to me. The following Wednesday, I saw in the newspaper the obituary that said that Nick had died, and the funeral was the following day on a Thursday. And I went to that funeral, and it was a very small handful of people that were there. And I actually officiated. I helped with the person who was in charge there. And I thought to myself, such a shame. He could have created a $3 million legacy gift to perpetuate his memory and all he did. And unfortunately, that money was not going to be going to the place that he really desired. So I think I want to just encourage people. This is the type of stuff that you have to deal with while the sun is shining. And we're all much more aware of our mortality due to COVID. So it's really something that I don't think there's ever been a better time to have this conversation. And if I can help you, Carrie, Maria, Stephen, all the great people at St. Joe's, we'd like to make you even more part of the family. So I appreciate you very much listening. I'd love to open it up for some questions, and I'll pass it back to Carrie.
Thank you so much, Mark. That was a really great presentation. Lots of information for our donors, and thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. I know a lot of our donors have received care at St. Joe's or had a loved one receive care, and oftentimes what comes up in their estate is in their plans is that they want to recognize a caregiver too at the hospital. So that's just a lovely way to tribute the care that you've received. So we would love to speak with anyone that would like to go forward with making a gift in their will, or approaching some of the strategies and the ideas that you've talked about today, Mark. I guess, so I don't have any questions in the chat box yet, but if anybody has any that they'd like to ask, please feel free to type it into the box down at the bottom. I guess what I would like to know is sort of at what point do you think your clients and our donors, people who are coming in for that consultation, what point should they involve their children or their family in those discussions?
It's a great question. Look, I meet many different people. Some people want everything to be anonymous from their children, right? Like, kids don't ask. I don't want to know, mom and dad, you're going to live forever. They don't want to talk about it. It's just one of those sort of taboo conversations. But I believe that, communication is extremely important. Even just making sure that your children know where everything is. I've had situations in 30 years where there's an emotional event and then right away there's a financial event. Where is everything? Bank accounts, keys to safety deposit boxes, digital passwords, life insurance policies. It's terrible if you don't do that kind of planning. So I'm just giving you a public service announcement. But as far as having the children involved, it's a great thing because it will take the kids' nervousness away about them being disinherited. And in fact, they're not going to be disinherited. They're actually just adopting charity, and they're getting exactly what they were supposed to be getting at the beginning, or even more. But now we've adopted a new family or a charity into that equation. So I think that's very important. And also, as we get older, we want to make sure that our children are there to help facilitate or adjudicate any of the plans that we've put into place. And I'll just give you an example. In my family, we have a donor advised fund, and I have 5 children, and now my 3 of my kids are over 18, so they're part of our donor advised fund board, meaning that if something happens to me or my wife Rhonda, God forbid, we want them to be involved now and to continue distributing our charitable money in perpetuity in our memory, hopefully for things that were important to us. So I think the earlier you can have your kids involved, the better. And even in some cases, like I have a meeting coming up, mom and dad have just passed it along to their kids, said, please meet with Mark. In other words, we don't need to get into the nuts and bolts, meet with Mark. Maybe their son is an accountant, or their son is a lawyer, or their son is more involved in their estate. And we have that conversation. So now son can go ahead and communicate or translate what Mark's ideas were back to mom and dad to make it more sort of bespoke for their particular situation. So I don't think there's any cookie cutter way of doing it, Carrie, but clearly take care of it while the sun is shining. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And is there an age that you would recommend people sort of start to come together to discuss all of this?
Well, look, it tends to lean towards when you're getting older, right? Like, you've gotten to that point where you've finished working or getting close to it, and you've made your money, and you feel you want to make a difference, right? So a lot of our clients are sort of 50 years of age plus, right? And we do a lot of work for people in their 60s and 70s and even 80s, right? But there are a lot of people who are very generous at a very young age, and those people, we want to get them involved as soon as possible. Like I mentioned, those situations with those young people who created philanthropic gifts to help them with their business, or to help them, in terms of connect them more to the institutions that they're passionate about. So I don't think there's any good time. It's, as I said, with COVID, the best time is right now, because we just don't know what's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Mark, can I ask a question too?
Sure, Maria.
So, people may think, oh, my estate, I don't have a business, I don't sit on necessarily a huge amount of money. How do you answer that question in terms of planning?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I realize I presented to everybody some numbers, $1 million, big numbers, right? But that's completely scalable, right? So, somebody is not in that snack bracket, there's $100,000, there's 50,000, whatever it is, it's going to help St. Joe's Hospital. But I think it really starts, in my opinion, with a gift and a will. I look at that gifts and wills are so simple. It doesn't mean that you're going to run out of money, and you've got something there that's significant that will certainly help your estate taxes, but also create a legacy. So that's something that's important, Maria. The other thing that I really feel is that people have done investing, but they haven't done planning. It's a big difference. Planning is, you're 60, and now it's really about preserving what you have. It's about getting maximum income from your investments. It's about tax efficiency, or being able to hold on to things that you have. So that's a different conversation. So I would suggest from the get-go that people have to do the planning. Once you've done the planning, it's incredible how people realize they can be more generous. There are a lot of people out there who are very wealthy who don't consider themselves very wealthy. And then there are people who are very modest lifestyles, but don't realize they can be so generous at no big risk or cost to their family. So, it's about providing education and wisdom and knowledge, and that takes having a professional or professionals on your team to be able to help you identify that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Very helpful. And so for our donors who are interested in meeting with you, Mark, is there something that they should bring with them? Would you follow up with them to let them know what they can bring or who they can bring?
Yeah, absolutely. So we absolutely encourage you to bring we're not here to find new professionals for you to deal with. We really believe in collaborating with your professionals already. But we'll start off with a Zoom call. Again, that's the way we're doing it today. So like this, where really it's like a little like going to the doctor. It's finding out what's important to you. What do you want to accomplish? And then it's really gathering a whole bunch of information, because you can't sort of give somebody a prescription without a proper diagnostics, right? If you do that, they call that malpractice. So you just want to gather that information, find out what's important to you, what your plans are, and then we take that information and we put together that analysis, to make sure, again, that you're never going to run out of money, never spend money you have. And that gives you a comfort of a big check mark. And then we can say, here's your situation. Here are 2, 3, 4 things that you could do to improve your situation, and include charity in the mix as well, right? Talk to your family, talk to your professionals about it. But it's just really gathering information on making sure people have a will, is it up to date? What are their assets? What are their liabilities? What do they buy things for? What were their costs then? What are their costs now? It's really doing the things that we have to do, but doing it now.
That's great.
And again, there's no obligation. It's really for, I'm part of this Legacy Council and love what St. Joe's is doing. And it's really having partnership. So if we can help you, we'll be delighted.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mark.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, let me add my thanks. We really appreciate your time and your interest and encouragement. It's such an important part of giving, people thinking about their legacy. And I think you're right. Probably all of us have thought about that differently over the last year. As we've sat in our houses, or if we've gone to work, or we've just had to think about our mortality in different ways in the face of this pandemic. So we really appreciate you thinking about, or helping us think more about, how we can help our families and how we can also potentially leave a legacy that continues a tradition that we've started in our lifetimes, and imprints that on our children and grandchildren. So, as we've mentioned, Mark's happy to talk to anyone who's interested today about, their own financial picture, the possibility of tax strategies, or making a legacy gift. It's a great opportunity to talk to him directly. He obviously has a ton of insight and expertise, and can help address your questions. So we're going to also be sending out a survey, and you can let us know if you'd like us to connect you with Mark. Or Carrie's also mentioned that we're partnering with the Canadian Free Wills Network, and we're happy to share that information with you as well. So many people don't know that even though a lot of our health, a lot of the support we get through our health system is paid through our taxes, there's many things that the government doesn't support. And that includes purchase of new equipment. It also includes support for many renovations. And if you've been in St. Joe's, or you've driven by St. Joe's, it's great to be 100 years old. And even though our facilities are not 100 years old, there are many areas where we're working to improve care. And so you really could make a difference in terms of connecting your legacy with some of those areas. So we really rely on the support of generous individuals in our community to help make a difference. And that makes care better for not only you in the here and now, but for generations moving forward. So, we want to continue keeping our promise to look after the health needs of our communities. And we hope you'll join with us too, along with your family, in creating a meaningful legacy for St. Joe's. So we so appreciate you joining with us today. Your time is precious, and we really value you sharing some time with us. Please let us know if you have any questions. We're always here and love talking to you. Looking forward to when we can speak with you directly again. Wishing you a wonderful day, and hope we'll see you again really soon. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and stay well.